A billionaire family insulted the waitress, then saw their $500 million empire collapse in seconds. Hi, my beautiful family. I speak to you today with a heart full of love, but also with truth. Our channel is built on your strength, your love, and your support. Every story I write is written with tears, with passion, and with prayer for each one of you. But my family, I see the channel going down because many forget to like, many forget to comment. It hurts me because it feels like my hard work is left unseen. I ask you today, not just as a creator, but as your brother who truly loves you, please, whenever you watch, give your love back. A simple like, a simple comment keeps this family alive, keeps our light shining, and gives me the power to bring you more and more beautiful stories. May God bless every woman in this family with honor, with dignity, and with unshakable strength. May every man be blessed with wisdom and respect. May our children rise higher than mountains, and may every home be filled with endless love and peace. Amen. If your heart is true, write present. If your love is real, write in the comment where you're watching from. Imagine walking into the most exclusive restaurant in the city. The chandeliers sparkle like diamonds, the wine list costs more than rent, and every table is filled with people who believe they own the world. Now imagine one of those families actually does. They don't just sit at the table, they bought the building, the land beneath it, maybe even the street outside. Owning half the skyline makes you bold. It also makes you careless. That's where this story begins. With a billionaire family who thought humiliating a waitress was nothing more than a little after-dinner entertainment. They had no idea that single act of arrogance would light a fuse under everything they built. And where it ends, with their $500 million empire collapsing in seconds. Now, you might think this is just another story of entitled customers being rude to service staff. I wish it were that simple. But this wasn't a minor tantrum or an impatient sigh. This was deliberate, cruel, the kind of insult meant to remind someone they don't belong. A few words, a mocking laugh, a gesture that said, "We're untouchable. You're nothing." But here's the thing about nobodies. Sometimes they're not as powerless as they look. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is holding the one thread that could unravel everything. That waitress? She wasn't just some random server they'd never see again. She had a connection, one they couldn't have imagined, and one that would turn their smug little smirks into panic. I won't spoil how it all unravels just yet, but let's just say the family who thought they were untouchable. They weren't. And justice? Oh, it came dressed sharper than any of their designer suits. Before we dive in, let me pause for just a second. Hey, if you love stories where justice isn't just served, it's chilled and plated with silver, please hit subscribe. These videos take hours of writing, editing, and emotional recovery from secondhand rage, so your support seriously means the world. Alright, let's start from the beginning. Her name was Maya, 23, sharp as a knife, but in the dining room of the city's most exclusive restaurant, she may as well have been invisible. That was the unspoken rule of the place. Guests dined like royalty, staff served like shadows. The restaurant itself was a spectacle. White marble floors polished until they gleamed, chandeliers dripping crystals that caught every flicker of candlelight. The air carried the faint perfume of truffle oil and expensive wine. It wasn't just a place to eat, it was where the city's elite came to flex their power. The kind of people who ordered sparkling water with an edge of disdain, who checked their watches like the world revolved around them. And for Maya, it was work. A grind. 12-hour shifts, aching feet. The kind of patience you only learn after years of biting your tongue. She didn't love the job, but she respected it. Every paycheck was another step toward her goals. Finishing school, paying off her debts, clawing her way to something better. She wasn't asking for much, just dignity. But in that dining room, dignity was a luxury rarely offered to staff. You wouldn't believe the things servers had to swallow just to keep their jobs. Customers who never made eye contact, who snapped fingers as if staff were dogs, who treated kindness like weakness. And Maya, she'd gotten used to the quiet sting of it, used to disappearing into the background while the wealthy put on their nightly performance. Still, she was good at her job. The kind of good that meant remembering orders without writing them down, refilling glasses before anyone noticed they were empty, keeping a smile even when someone spoke to her like she wasn't human. She was observant too. She'd pick up on the tiny details, the nervous tapping of a guest before they closed a deal, the way a wife's laugh froze the second her husband started bragging too loudly. She saw more than anyone realized. And yet, to most, she was nobody. Just the waitress. The staff shared unspoken glances about it, of course. You learn to roll your eyes in solidarity, to pass each other on the kitchen line with muttered curses about whatever customer had just unloaded their bad day on you. It was survival. But every once in a while, someone went too far. A guest would cross that invisible line between entitled and cruel. And that's when the air in the room changed, when even the other customers noticed. Maya had seen it happen before. Wealthy regulars berating the hostess for a bad table. A tech mogul who once made a server cry over the temperature of his steak. She'd watch these scenes play out with the same thought every time. Why do people think money buys them the right to treat others like trash? But none of that compared to what happened the night they came in. The Billionaire family. The kind of family whose last name everyone knew. The ones who didn't just make the news, they owned the outlets printing it. They walked in like they owned the air itself. Designer suits, dripping diamonds. A laugh that carried across the entire room. The hostess straightened nervously. The manager suddenly appeared out of nowhere, fawning over them. And Maya? She just hoped she'd be assigned to any other table. Because deep down, she already knew. Families like that didn't come to dinner for the food. They came to remind everyone else of their power. And she was about to find out just how far they go. Have you ever had a job where people treated you like you were invisible? Drop your experience if you've been there. They swept in like royalty. That's the only way to describe it. The maitre d' practically bowed. Staff scrambled to rearrange tables, and the manager himself rushed forward as though the Pope had just walked through the doors. But it wasn't holiness commanding that attention, it was money. Old, loud, suffocating money. The Kingsleys. That name alone carried weight in the city. Real estate moguls. Politicians on their payroll. Half the skyline had their fingerprints on it. To most people, they were untouchable, a dynasty carved out of glass and steel. To Maya, though, they were just another table of guests. Or at least, they should have been. From the start, it was chaos. Mrs. Kingsley didn't sit before complaining about the lighting. The eldest daughter demanded a drink not listed anywhere on the menu. The father snapped his fingers the way someone might summon a dog. It wasn't just arrogance, it was muscle memory. The kind of entitlement that had been rehearsed for generations. Maya kept her face neutral, her voice calm. Of course, sir. I'll check on that right away. She had perfected the art of disappearing behind polite smiles. But every order was designed to test her patience. Every request, a reminder that she wasn't seen as a person, just an accessory to their evening. The middle son smirked as she poured his wine. Careful with that bottle. It probably costs more than you make in a week. The table chuckled. Maya set the glass down gently, eyes steady, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. And then came the youngest, Daniel, barely 20, still riding the wave of his family name, and already cruel in a way that felt practiced. He leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on her as if she were a target. So, he drawled, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "Where'd they find you? Some little hole in the wall diner? Or was it McDonald's?" The family laughed. Sharp, brittle laughter that sliced through the room. Maya's jaw tightened, but her hands didn't falter. She topped off a glass, nodded, and moved to the next guest. Daniel wasn't finished. "I mean, listen to that accent. You really think you belong here, serving people like us? You're nothing." The word hit harder than he probably realized. Nothing, it echoed, not just in her ears, but in the sudden hush that followed. Because here's the thing. When someone that rich, that powerful, says something that cruel, it doesn't just humiliate the target. It stains the air. Other diners shifted in their seats. A couple at a nearby table exchanged glances. Even the staff, trained to keep their heads down, froze for half a second too long. Everyone heard it. Everyone saw it. But the Kingsleys? They didn't care. They carried on, laughing at their own venom, clinking glasses as though they just delivered the wittiest joke of the evening. Maya swallowed the sting, forcing her face into that careful mask she'd worn for years. Inside, her chest burned, not just from the insult, but from the way the room seemed to tilt against her. All eyes on the nobody waitress. The Kingsleys thought they had broken her, reduced her to silence in front of strangers, and for a moment, she let them believe it, because that's what they thrived on, wasn't it? Power, the kind that crushes quietly, leaving no marks except the ones people carry home with them. To them, Maya wasn't a person. She was a prop, something to lean on, laugh at, forget about the second they stepped outside. But power makes people sloppy. It blinds them. And that night, in their arrogance, the Kingsleys had no idea who they were dealing with. No idea that the nobody waitress they had just humiliated was about to become the name they'd never forget. They thought they'd crushed her spirit. What they really did was light the fuse. The night of the breaking point didn't announce itself with fanfare. It began like every other evening shift, linen pressed, silver polished, staff moving like clockwork under the chandelier's glow. Maya clocked in, tied her apron, and told herself the same thing she always did: just get through it, one shift at a time. But then the Kingsleys walked in again. They swept past the hostess as if she were invisible, claiming their usual corner like it belonged to them. Every staff member exchanged the same glance, tight smiles, quiet groans. And when Maya saw her name beside their table number on the seating chart, she felt the air catch in her lungs. It was going to be one of those nights. From the start, they were relentless. Mr. Kingsley waved her over with the flick of his wrist, ordering a bottle of wine older than she was. Mrs. Kingsley sent her steak back twice, snapping, "Do you even know what medium rare means?" The daughters bickered about designer bags loud enough for half the room to hear. And then Daniel, always Daniel, the youngest son, with the smirk that could curdle milk. As Maya leaned in to clear a plate, he raised his glass. "A toast," he announced, loud enough to silence the room. "To good wine, good fortune." He looked straight at her, and the reminder that not everyone belongs at the table. The laughter that followed wasn't just cruel, it was performative. The entire family joined in, reveling in their joke at her expense. Other guests turned their heads. Conversations faltered. For a moment, the dining room's elegant hum fractured under the sound of their ridicule. Maya felt every eye on her. Her hands tightened on the tray, her cheeks flushed hot. The words sank like stones in her chest. She could have snapped back. She wanted to. She wanted to slam the tray on the table and tell them exactly where they could shove their fortune. But she didn't. Instead, she steadied her breath, lifted her chin, set the glasses down with perfect precision. Her composure became its own quiet rebellion. "Will there be anything else, sir?" she asked evenly, her tone crisp, controlled. Daniel smirked wider. "Just your smile. Though, let's be honest, even that looks cheap." The family roared again and sighed. Something shifted. Maya had endured insults before. She'd been dismissed, ignored, treated like she didn't exist. But this was different. This wasn't just arrogance. It was humiliation, sharpened into a weapon, delivered in front of a full audience. And as she walked away from their table, balancing the tray against her palm, she felt the change crystallize. That's when something in me snapped. It wasn't rage that filled her, not the kind that burns quick and loud. This was colder, steadier, a clarity that came with the realization that they thought they had broken her, that in their world of money and marble, she was nothing more than a punchline. But they were wrong. Maya wasn't powerless. She wasn't nameless. And what they didn't know, what they couldn't even imagine, was that she held a connection, a single thread, that could unravel their empire from the inside out. They thought she was nobody. What they didn't know was that she was about to become their reckoning. If this happened to you, would you walk away? Or plan revenge? Revenge rarely starts with fire. Sometimes, it begins in silence, in stillness. With a single phone call. For Maya, that moment came 2 days after the Kingsleys' cruel toast. She was folding napkins in the break room when her phone buzzed. A name lit up the screen: Leela, an old friend she hadn't spoken to in months, Leela wasn't just any friend. She worked in finance, the kind of job where numbers weren't just numbers, they were weapons. "Hey stranger," Leela's voice crackled through the line. "Funny thing, I've been looking over some files. Your favorite family keeps popping up." Maya froze. "The Kingsleys?" Leela laughed softly. "Who else? Let's just say, their empire isn't as clean as they'd like the world to believe." And just like that, a door opened. It wasn't chance. It felt almost like fate. For the first time, Maya realized she wasn't just standing outside their glittering world. She had a thread that connected her to it. A thread strong enough to pull. She didn't tell Leela everything. Not yet. But she listened. She asked the right questions. She started learning the cracks in the Kingsleys' perfect marble walls. Unpaid contractors. Shady offshore accounts. Deals that could collapse with the right whisper in the wrong ear. This wasn't about flipping a table or shouting them down in public. That would have been easy and meaningless. What Maya wanted wasn't drama. It was justice. She played it cold. It work. She kept her head down, pouring wine, clearing plates, smiling when she had to. If the Kingsleys noticed her at all, they probably thought she'd finally accepted her place beneath them. What they didn't see was that every night after her shift, she was awake at her kitchen table, laptop glowing, piecing together the puzzle Leela fed her. Screenshots, transaction records, whispered rumors from employees too scared to go public. One by one, the pieces stacked into a picture even the Kingsleys couldn't laugh their way out of. And Maya, quiet, invisible Maya, was the one putting it all together. Sometimes she'd pause, staring at the evidence on her screen. Her heart would pound, her hands tremble. She'd ask herself, am I really doing this? But then she'd remember Daniel's smirk, his voice calling her cheap in front of a room full of strangers. And the doubt would burn away. She didn't want to ruin them just to watch them fall. That wasn't her style. No, she wanted them to feel something deeper, the weight of exposure, the sting of accountability. She started small. A discreet leak to a business blog about questionable donations. A screenshot slipped anonymously to a watchdog group tracking corporate corruption. Just enough to stir whispers in the right circles. Then she sat back and watched the ripples spread. News outlets began circling. Investors grew restless. Clients hesitated, and the Kingsleys, so untouchable, so smug, suddenly looked shaky. The restaurant, they still demanded, still laughed too loud, still treated the staff like furniture. But Maya could see it. The tension in their shoulders, the clipped whispers between phone calls, the way Mrs. Kingsley's smile cracked when her husband's phone buzzed during dinner. Each night, Maya poured their wine with steady hands, hiding the quiet satisfaction building in her chest. Because she knew, she was the storm they couldn't see yet. The coldest revenge isn't about fire, it's about precision, about patience, about knowing exactly when to pull the thread so the whole tapestry unravels. And Maya was just getting started. What's the most satisfying karma moment you've ever seen play out? At first, the Kingsleys tried to pretend nothing was wrong. That's what people with too much money do. They believe if they smile wide enough, the world won't notice the rot spreading behind their polished veneers. But the cracks were impossible to ignore. One by one, vendors stopped returning their calls. A luxury supplier quietly cut ties, citing inventory issues. An investment partner suddenly restructured priorities. Those were polite words. What they really meant was, we don't want to drown with you. Investors grew nervous. Stocks dipped. Whispers turned into headlines. And for the first time in years, the Kingsleys weren't the ones holding the spotlight, they were trapped beneath it. I still remember how Daniel, the smug youngest son, stormed into the restaurant one night. His tie askew, his voice sharp. He snapped at the maitre d', barked for a private table. His father trailed behind, face pale, phone glued to his ear. They didn't look untouchable anymore. They looked hunted. Across the dining room, people watched. Phones tilted just slightly, cameras capturing every flinch, every crack in the armor. A dynasty unraveling in real time. And Maya? She didn't say a word. She delivered their food, topped their glasses, and moved with the same quiet grace as always. To them, she was still just the waitress. But in that silence, she was untouchable, almost regal. The irony was delicious. The same woman they'd humiliated in front of strangers was now the only one who could look them in the eye without flinching. The family scrambled. PR firms were hired. Carefully crafted statements hit the news cycle. Misunderstandings, baseless claims, jealous competitors. But the public wasn't buying it. Not this time. The Kingsleys had built their empire on intimidation and arrogance. And when people like that start to fall, nobody rushes to catch them. Behind closed doors, panic set in. Deals collapsed. Accounts froze. Friends of convenience suddenly forgot their names. The family who once treated an entire city like their playground was learning the cruel truth of power. It vanishes the moment people stop believing in it. And through it all, Maya kept her head high. She didn't gloat. She didn't throw their downfall back in their faces. That would have been too small, too easy. Instead, she simply carried herself with dignity, a living reminder of the respect they'd thrown away. The cracks weren't just in their business. They were in their facade, their reputation, their very identity. And no amount of money, charm, or empty apologies could plaster it back together. Should the family apologize? Or do they deserve every ounce of downfall? It didn't happen with a single blow. Empires like theirs never do. They collapse piece by piece, contracts pulled, investors vanishing, numbers bleeding red across every screen. The Kingsleys had spent decades convincing the world they were unshakable. But within weeks, their $500 million fortress looked more like a house of cards. The stock tanked. Suppliers walked away. Longtime allies refused to return calls. And when the media caught wind of the chaos, it spread like wildfire. I can still picture the father's face in the headlines, eyes sunken, jaw clenched, the image of a man watching his kingdom slip through his hands. Their empire wasn't just crumbling, it was dissolving in public. And then came the letters, the emails, the desperate, carefully worded apologies, misunderstandings, unfortunate mistakes, deep regret. Funny how arrogance turns into humility the moment the spotlight shifts. Did Maya answer them? Not once. She didn't need to. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. Her silence echoed louder than any confrontation ever could. Each unanswered message reminded them of the one thing money couldn't buy back: dignity. The Kingsleys, a family who thought they owned the skyline, were now begging for the acknowledgement of the very woman they'd humiliated. And she was too busy living her life to even look their way. By the time the dust settled, their empire was gone. The skyscraper that bore their name was sold off. Their lavish parties stopped. Their influence evaporated. And all it took was one insult too many, tossed at the wrong person. When the dust finally settled, the headlines moved on. The Kingsleys were yesterday's scandal. Their empire, gone. Their influence, a memory. But Maya's story didn't end in flames. It grew quietly, like sunlight breaking through after a storm. She still worked hard, still carried herself with the same grace she always had. But there was a shift in her. She wasn't walking with her head down anymore. She stood taller, not because the world suddenly respected her, but because she finally respected herself. There was a peace in knowing she hadn't lowered herself to their level. She didn't need to gloat or post triumphant messages online. She had simply lived with dignity, and life had done the rest. Funny thing is, people in her circle noticed. The same coworkers who had watched her humiliation now watched her glow. Customers, too, those who remembered the night of the insult, the ones who had cringed at the cruelty. They began treating her differently, like they'd been reminded of something simple. That respect isn't about money. It's not about status or titles or owning half a skyline. Respect is about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. And Maya, she embodied that lesson. She saved more. She traveled a little, took courses she'd put off for years. Slowly, she built a life not defined by survival, but by choice. Every step forward reminded her she hadn't just endured, she'd risen. Meanwhile, the Kingsleys faded. Their name became a warning, a whispered reminder in business circles of what happens when arrogance blinds you. People stopped fearing them. They became irrelevant. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. They lost everything chasing power. She gained clarity by holding onto her humanity, and in the end, that's the real twist of this story. Revenge wasn't the victory. Healing was. Because true power? It isn't money. It isn't status. True power is treating people with dignity, no matter who they are. So, that's how it all ended. A billionaire dynasty undone not by a rival company, not by some financial storm, but by their own arrogance. One cruel laugh at the wrong person. One moment where they forgot that dignity isn't optional. And on the other side, a waitress who chose silence over spectacle, who didn't need to fight dirty because restraint itself was her sharpest weapon. There's a kind of strength in that, isn't there? Not the loud kind. Not the kind that makes headlines, but the quiet, unshakable kind that can't be bought or destroyed. In the end, the family who thought they were untouchable fell, and the woman they mocked walked away stronger. It's poetic, really. Proof that arrogance crumbles, but dignity endures. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. True power doesn't come from wealth, or influence, or titles. It comes from how you treat people when you don't think it matters. If you found this story as cathartic as I did, please hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe. These videos take hours to write, sift through, and bring to life, and your support helps us keep going. Until next time, remember this: kindness costs nothing, but in the end, it's worth more than any empire.